Anyway, last week I gave you a number of things. We make such a big deal out of sharing our faith with people. We just, we get all scared and, we're afraid to cross these imaginary lines and stuff like that. And then, one of the things that I know that we have, we lack confidence in ourselves. We lack confidence in our knowledge about God and our relationship about God. Last week I gave you a couple of things that you have as a Christian that a person without Christ doesn't have, and those are just to encourage you. God is, and we put it this way. To sum up last week, you have a treasure in earthen vessels. This mortal body has eternal treasure worth far more than gold and silver, and God says it is a treasure that is in earthen vessels. Well, that's what you have. But today I want us to talk about three more thoughts that I think affect us when we go to share our faith. Ask yourself this question. You don't have to show me a hand or anything. When was the last time you tried to share your faith with another person? Whether it was by a letter or an email or a face-to-face or an invite, or when was the last time you tried to actually have a conversation about God with someone else? Was it a day ago? A week ago? A month ago? 3 months ago? A year ago? When was the last time you had a conversation with someone about God, other than the people in the church, right? I made that clear anyway. So, and now I want you to ask yourself this question. If you can remember that time, I want you to ask yourself, when was the last time you thought you were supposed to say something and didn't? When was the last time you felt that you could have said something to that person that may help them, but you didn't? Now that I'd like to hear an answer. Can somebody point to a time that you can recall that you felt like you were supposed to say something and didn't? Like 2 months ago. Why didn't you? Okay. Someone else? Anyone? So I'm sorry. Why didn't you share with them when you thought you were supposed to? It just kind of goes nowhere. Anyone else? Anyone else? I'll give you one example. I can't remember the most recent one, but I'll give you one example. I was working for a guy, and I really felt that I was supposed to share with him about the love of God, and I didn't, and I don't have any other way to say it except that the Holy Spirit, just like put this weight on my shoulders, and eventually it was like a week or so later. I had to go back. I just had to go back. I mean, I was working there. The job was done, and I had to go back, and I had to talk to him. And I went back, and I knocked on the door, and I asked if so and so was home, and the wife started to cry, and she said he died. And I was like, was I the only one that God had selected to send to that person? And I don't know. But I know that I knew that I blew it. Has any, short of the guy or the person dying, have you ever blown it? Can I see a hand? Have you ever blown it? Yeah, sure. So, when we blow it, what is going wrong? What are we doing or not doing? What are we all hung up about? Well, In our culture today, it seems that being a Christian is not as popular as it once was. But I think that sharing our faith with someone is usually sharing our faith with another person is probably not as hard as we make it on ourselves. And I mean, we make such a big deal out of telling people that we believe in God, and so I ask myself, why am I ashamed? What am I ashamed of? And it's like we're afraid to talk about God, and it's like there's something wrong with us because we believe in Him. And it seems like we make it really complicated, and we make it hard, and we allow fear to overrule what we know that we're supposed to do. And if we're honest, when it comes to sharing about God with another person, now let's see some hands on this. When it comes to sharing about God with another person, are you like me? Do you talk yourself out of it before you even say a word? Before you even say something, you'll say, they're not going to listen. Oh, they're not going to be interested in that. Oh, they're not going to this, that, or the other. And so rather than if you're fishing, you can stand by the shoreline all day long with your rod on the shore, but sooner or later, if you want to catch something, you got to cast out, right? But the bottom line is, when it comes to sharing my faith, many times I'm convinced that these people don't want to hear what I have to say about God, and so I say nothing at all. Anyone else like me? Yeah. Yeah, so there's a problem that we have, right? But, rather than worrying about crossing these imaginary lines and offending people and doing this and doing that, what I want you to start to think about when it comes to sharing your faith is really kind of simple. We need to start thinking about it as one hungry person telling another hungry person where to get bread. One hungry person telling another hungry person where to get bread. And so rather than quitting before we start, here's the deal. Long before I became a minister, I found out that when I started to follow God in my life, life got better. Did that happen to you? Apart from being a minister, that happened years down the road. But when I started to live for God, my life got better. And then I started to see all of these people that I knew, friends and family and people and they were in the same boat that I was. They were facing the same challenges and problems that I had faced. But when I found God, I got better. And so it's just a natural thing for me to say to people, hey, I've been where you're at. This is what I did to get better. I was one hungry person telling another person where to get bread. That's not crossing any line. That's just trying to help somebody. Now, Pastor, where did you get that? We got that from 2 Kings chapter 7. We're going to look at this story now, and I don't have a Bible, so I should probably get one. And if somebody can start let me just give you the setting here. In 2 Kings chapter 7, there is, Israel is being attacked by another nation. And this army has laid siege against the city of Samaria. And so this army is camped around, and the people who are living in Samaria, they are now starving. And if you are familiar with this story, this is the place where the king is walking along the wall, and a woman comes up and says, King, help me. And he says, what's the problem? He says, well, me and this lady, yesterday, she said that if we would kill my son and eat him, then tomorrow we would kill his son. And we would kill her son and eat him. And so it says that, you guys are looking at me like it says that in the Bible. You should read your Bible. It's an awesome story. Anyway, so that's what she did. She murdered her son. They cooked him, and her and this other woman ate her son. And then when it came time for the other woman to kill her son, that woman hid her child so that they didn't have to kill him. So that's true story. It's right here, and God doesn't lie. And so this siege, this attack on this city is it's desperate. And these folks are eating pigeon poop. That's what it says. And not only are they eating pigeon poop, it's being sold for like a high amount of money in their day. So they're taking the head of a donkey and they're selling it for like a king's ransom just to have something to nibble on. So this is a bad time. Okay, and then so that's the city of Samaria, and they're completely surrounded by this army, and no one can get in, and no one can get out, and there's nothing left to eat, and the king doesn't know what to do, and the people are actually cannibalizing one another at this stage of the game. And then outside of the gate of Samaria are a couple lepers, and these lepers are never allowed into the city. A leper was never allowed anywhere near the city, and so they would sit outside the gates and beg for scraps and things like that. And if you were a leper in that day, when you had leprosy, if someone was walking down the same road as you, if you saw them, you were supposed to move to the other side of the road away from them. And before they got to you, you were supposed to be shouting, "I'm a leper, stay away! I'm a leper, stay away!" So these guys had nothing. I mean, they were nothing. They were as poor as dirt. They were beyond poor as dirt. And they had nothing at all, no status, no claim, no knowledge, no education, nothing. They were lepers. And so they're sitting there in the city, inside the city, people are dying from starvation. And outside is the army, and they're, they have food, and they're the ones waging the battle against the city. And these lepers say, "Look, we might as well go and surrender to this army. We might as well go surrender to them, because if we stay here, we're going to die. What's the worst they're going to do to us? Kill us faster?" Is basically what they said. And so they decided that they were going to go and surrender to this foreign army and get away from the city. And while they went to the army, what they didn't know was that the night before, God had done a work, and he had frightened the army that was there. I don't know how he did it. It says he made some noise, and they thought that they were being attacked by an even greater army. And so all of these soldiers that had been sieging Samaria, they ran. They ran and they left everything behind. They ran for their lives. They left their weapons. They left their food. They left their clothing. They left everything that they had behind. And they were just getting out of Dodge as fast as they could. And so these four lepers come up and they go into the very first tent. And there's no one at the tent, and they don't see any guards around. And they go into this tent and they see food. Wow, something to eat. And they go in and they start to eat this food. And remember, they're lepers. They're beggars. They have nothing. They put the clothes on that they see there. And then they see gold and they see silver. And they start to pack out this gold and silver. And it's going on and on and on. And they keep taking more and more stuff. And then finally, they go into the next tent. And it's the same deal. There's no one there. And so they eat more and they take more. And then it's going on and on and on. And then we get to 2 Kings chapter 7. Let's see. Verse 8. Now I'm reading from a King James, so I'm going to be giving you these and thous. But verse 8 is where we're at. You'll get the drift. And when these lepers, that's those guys, came to the outside part of the camp, they went into one tent and they ate and they drank and they carried away the silver and the gold and the clothing, and they went and they hid it. And they came again and they entered into another tent and they carried that away also, and they went and they hid it. So here they are, they're pillaging, right? And they're hoarding all of this stuff for themselves. They're hoarding it all to themselves. Verse 9, then they said to one another, "This isn't right. This day is a day of good tidings, and we are holding our peace. If we tarry till the morning light, some mischief will come upon us. Now, therefore, come, that we may go and tell the king's household." Now, if you didn't follow that, this is what they said. They looked at each other and they said, "You know what? We can't keep this a secret anymore. All those people back in Samaria, no matter how rotten they were towards us as lepers, they're dying in there. And we have all the good news right here. We got the food, we got the clothing, we got the gold, we got the silver." He said, and the one guy said to the other, "We got to do something about it. We've got to go tell them. We've got to go tell them." Now, you may be wondering what that has to do with you sharing your faith. Remember what I started this conversation with? I said that God has given us a treasure in an earthen vessel. Did you deserve the things that God has given you? If you deserve the things God has given you, raise your hand. I saw that. You were trying, huh? You were debating, weren't you? You know what? We don't deserve anything that God gives us because our God is a good God, and to be honest, we're not good because we have sin. So everything that God gave us, we didn't deserve, right? So before we came to God, we're like those lepers. We have nothing. We have nothing to offer. We're not part of this or part. I mean, we're just like out there. We're at the bottom. And it's only because of what God has given us that we have anything at all as far as a spiritual inheritance or strength or direction or love or peace or forgiveness or any of the other things that God offers. But now you and I have a choice. We can just stay right here and we can hoard all of this stuff for ourselves. Or we can do the right thing and help all of these other hungry people find bread. You see, that's what they did. In fact, when they went back to this town, no one believed them. No one believed that they had found bread and clothing and all this. No one believed it until finally they sent out a contingent. They sent out a few guards or whatever, and they came back and said, you know, those lepers weren't lying. Everything that they said is true. I mean, the place is deserted. And so these lepers who didn't have anything, who didn't deserve anything, who weren't considered to be important or educated or prestigious or any of those other things that we value so much, these guys had bread, and they told others where to get bread. God has given you something unique. He has given you forgiveness and love and peace and patience. Maybe you don't take advantage of it, but it's there for you. That treasure that he's given you is something that you can share or you can hoard to yourself. Remember, it took them a while to figure it out. They took it and they ran and they hid it and they came back and got some more and ran and hid it. Boy, sounds like our Sunday mornings, huh? We're here Sunday morning, we don't see each other, come back Sunday morning, get some more, go away, don't do anything with it, come back next Sunday, get some more, go away, don't do anything with it. Is something wrong? You know what sharing our faith is? It is one hungry person telling another hungry person where they can get bread in Christ. You know, you don't have to be afraid to share your faith with someone that you know needs to hear some positive stuff about God in their life. You don't have to be afraid of that. You're just one hungry person who found bread in God, and you're giving that to another hungry person. Does that make sense? All right, here we go. Here's the second thing. Sharing your faith with God with another person means that you're going to have to take a stand. This is the one we don't like. Sharing my faith in God with another person means I'm going to have to take a stand. And that's maybe the scariest part of talking about God. If you think that talking about God to someone opens up a can of worms, well, this one is the can opener. Once you say, I'm a Christian and I want to talk to you or something like that, man, you've opened that can of worms. You've made that stand. And I think a lot of us get very afraid of that idea. And you know, it's like when we say to ourselves, I'm going to have to make a stand for Christ, that's where all of our fears lie. That's where our insecurities about God are. And that's where we wonder things like, well, what if they ask me something about God that I don't know? What if they make fun of me or tease me? What if they don't want to be my friend anymore? What if they're just going to shut me down and not hear anything? What if they point out something that they know that I do wrong in my life? If I make a stand for God, I'm going to suddenly be under the magnifying glass. And none of us like to be scrutinized that closely. And you know what? Here's the thing. I have all of those same insecurities. I have all of those same doubts. I have all of those same questions. But I love how God uses the Bible to explain things to us so that we can understand. Would you turn with me to Acts chapter 2? Acts chapter 2, verse 14. Acts chapter 2, verse 14. We're going to look at one little sentence. It doesn't really seem to say that much until you know the backstory. Or, as Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story. Acts chapter 2, verse 14. If you're with me, here we go. But Peter, taking his stand with the 11, raised his voice and declared to them, Men of Judea and all you who live in Jerusalem, let this be known to you and give heed to my words. Now, that really doesn't sound dramatic, right? I mean, like, okay, that's nice. Peter's going to say something. Okay, big deal. So what? What's that have to do with taking a stand for Christ? So on the surface, it doesn't seem like such a great answer for all of our fears and all of our insecurities until we remember who Peter was at this moment in his life. Now, there's a lot that we know about Peter. You know, the Bible talks about him a lot. There's a number of books in the Bible that are written by Peter. But this time in life, this is the Peter who had just denied knowing Jesus, not once, not twice, but 3 times in one night. 3 times in one night. I don't know the guy. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just keeping warm here by the fire while Jesus is being judged in a kangaroo court. And you know, maybe one of the most heartbreaking verses of the New Testament is it says that when Peter denied Jesus the 3rd time and the cock crowed just the way Jesus said the rooster was going to crow before Peter was going to deny Jesus 3 times before the rooster crowed, and he denied Jesus, and right after that rooster crowed, and Peter and Jesus' eyes met, and Peter ran off a broken man. Now that same Peter is now standing with these 11 other guys. He is now did you see it? Peter taking his stand with the 11. That's the key thing here. Peter taking his stand with the 11. There's that old adage, you'll stand for something or fall for anything. Peter's decided that he's going to stand once and for all for Christ. The same Peter that had denied God, the same Peter that needed forgiveness, but this same Peter who just denied Jesus a short time ago, he had every reason to believe that he was not worthy to represent God. Come on, tell me you're not like that. Tell me that there aren't times in your life that you have not denied God being the king of your life. Tell me it's not true. If you tell me it's not true, I'm probably going to call you a liar. Because all of us have been where Peter is at one time or another in our life. Oh, maybe we alluded to it, but we weren't willing to take a stand and say, yeah, I'm a Christian. I don't believe that. Maybe we've suggested that we might be Christian until we saw the temperature of the water and thought, oh, we're going to back off. You know, we're not the only ones. I mean, Peter was not the only one who didn't feel worthy to represent Christ. Most of us in this room don't feel worthy to represent Christ. It's just how we are. And you know what I like about movies, action movies, you know, the Rambo movies, all that kind of stuff? There's always that one scene. I saw it just last week when I was watching something. There's always that one scene where the hero is like hiding behind a wall, you know, and the bullets are exploding around them, and you know there's dust and they're wincing from the bullets hitting, and then all of a sudden they get this look of determination, you know, they'll all of a sudden they'll get up and they'll muster themselves up and they'll pick up their weapons and they'll turn and they'll face the enemy and they'll begin to take a stand, right? And then on the really lousy ones, they get killed as soon as they turn around the corner. But that's not part of this story. But you see, there's this moment when we have to confront our fear and be willing to stand. This was Peter's place where he turned the corner. Right up until this time, Peter was still the guy that had denied Christ 3 times and was not worthy to represent him. But now, when he took a stand, this was his corner. And once he turned that corner, there was going to be no turning back. The only thing to do was to go forward into whatever the future would hold for him. You see, it's different for Peter than it was for us. Do you know why? Because they were killing guys that day when you were claiming to be a Christian. When you said you were a Jesus follower, there was a good chance you were going to wind up on a cross like Jesus had. There was big reasons not to say, I'm with him. Do we have those reasons today? And yet, we're not willing to take a stand. That fear can be pushed out by the love and the power of God. In fact, this one here and the next one, this next point, I think they go hand in hand. That was Peter's corner. And here's the deal. When you're willing to take a stand for God, God's going to use that. He's willing to use that. When we say that we recognize that we're God's man or we're God's woman and that we're going to take a stand at that moment in time, I think God does mighty things through our obedience. I think he does great things through our obedience. Peter couldn't guarantee what the outcome was going to be, and neither can we. But the one thing that was sure is that he had made the decision that was going to change his life. He made the decision that was going to change his life. We're in the book of Acts. Now I want you to turn to Acts chapter 4, verse 13. And when it comes to this idea of boosting the signal and sharing God's love with other people, I don't think that there's anything that says it better than this next verse. Acts chapter 4, verse 13. Here's what I want you to see here. I want you to see that confidence comes from being with Jesus. Confidence comes from being with Jesus. Now, you don't maybe know it, but this was right after Peter and John were used by God to heal a 40-year-old cripple who was at the temple every day begging for alms. He was at the temple. He was never allowed to go into the temple because he was considered unclean. So for 40 years, he had never been able to go where God said he lived. For 40 years, he was never allowed to go into the house of God. So you know what God did? God came to him. That's pretty amazing right there. I mean, we could stop right there. God came to him. You know where I found God? I found God in a living room. I didn't find him in a church. Where did you find God? Guess what? God came to you. And so afterwards, after this guy was healed, and the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the high priest of the day, all the same people that had just put Jesus to death, they arrested Peter and John and they took them into court and they yelled at them and they accused them and they did this and that, but they couldn't punish them because everyone realized it was a work of God. And so they sent them out and they said, listen, don't you talk about this Jesus guy no more. No matter what you do, don't you talk about this Jesus guy. And then we read these verses in Acts chapter 4, verse 13. And this is the men who had them on trial. Now as they, that's those Pharisees and all that, now as they observed the confidence of Peter and John, they understood that they were uneducated and untrained men. They were amazed and began to recognize them as having been with Jesus. What made Peter and John so special? Well, they weren't trained in the scriptures. They didn't go to school. They didn't have a special class on sharing faith. The only thing that made these men have confidence, the only thing that made them special was that they had been with Jesus. And here's the amazing thing. It was recognizable. People could tell the difference. They could tell that these men had been with Jesus. That's what it's supposed to do for you. That's what it does for us. This verse tells us one thing that's really important. When you spend time with Jesus, what he has rubs off on you. What he has rubs off on you. The more time I spend with Jesus, the more confidence I have in his ability to use me, even if I don't know all the answers. The more time I spend with Jesus, the more I will walk and talk like him. The more the world will be drawn to the light that's inside of me. The more time I spend with Jesus, the less fear controls me. My confidence comes from spending time with Jesus. Okay, so here's our questions that I want you to ask yourself for today. And we're going to start with the last point first. When it comes to this idea of spending time with Jesus, of practicing your faith, I was thinking about when it comes to this idea of spending time with Jesus and practicing your faith, how much time are you spending with Jesus? How much time are you practicing your faith? How much time are you devoting to being with God in your life? Is this it? Sunday morning, is this it for you? It can be better for you if it is. But you'll have to make the choices to spend time with Jesus. And when you do, God will bless you by that. How much time are you spending with Jesus? Here's another question to ask yourself. Am I willing to make a stand with other people in my church for Jesus? If I make a commitment to you that I'm going to make a stand to Jesus, for Jesus, with someone this week, I'm going to make it a point of my life to talk to someone about God, to try and begin a conversation, to invite them to a service or a small group or something. If I'm willing to make that commitment, are you willing to take a stand with me and make that commitment? And not just to shut me up. I mean, are you willing to make a commitment and do it? It's just kind of like, I'll jump if you jump first. Right? Is that what it feels like to you? No, let me tell you what this is like. This is like seeing thousands of people floating in a sea that they're not going to be able to escape, and you and I have the only life preservers. And God's saying we need to throw them and draw them in. I'm willing to make a stand. Are you? Here's the third question I want you to ask yourself, and this is where we started this morning. If sharing what I know about God is like one hungry person telling another hungry person where to get bread, who do I know that needs what I know about God? Do you know someone? Do you work with someone that needs to know? They're hungry for something, they can't even identify it, but you know what they're hungry for is God, because that's the thing that's missing in their life. God's satisfying you, I hope. You're finding everything that he has for you. You have this treasure stored in earthen vessels. Who do you know that needs to hear what you know about God? That's the person that I want you to talk to this week, if you're willing to make a stand. If you're worried about that, then I would suggest that you spend some time with Jesus and you get a little confidence build up in your heart.